Get it. Why?
Okay, let's play some damn chess!
And the Earth and all of its natural consequences and organic results
from China!
Its time frame, with no intervention whatsoever. So where should we start? Let's start with defining prayer as listed in the Bible. The Bible is very clear about the power of prayer, what it can do, how magnificent it is. What the Bible is not so clear about is how we should pray, when should we pray, in what matter, and when to expect what. Let's look at a few verses. Philippians 4:6-7 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving present your request to God." By prayer and petition. Now petition can be a lot of things, but it seems as far as the context
go to hell.
Praying without ceasing. We're also told in this verse to pray with thanksgiving, with gratefulness. Great. What else is about it? Matthew 7:7-8 says, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find it. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds." Now this verse is a little bit more poetic, so maybe we shouldn't take it too seriously. Let's try another one. Mark 11:24. "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." Now that is very clear. All we have to do is simply believe in the power of our prayer, and all we have to do is ask, and it will be given. It doesn't give any other specifications about what we should be asking for or a time frame. It simply says if we believe it enough, it will indeed happen. So do those parents of those dying children simply not believe enough, or is this verse just not accurate? Let's try one more.
Stupid! God, that was stupid!
On earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father.
Stupid machine!
This one should inspire even more faith. First of all, it's
stupid!
Second of all, he's saying it again, meaning he has said it more than once.
Don't even think about it!
Thirdly, he starts the sentence with the word truly.
Stupid!
Showcase and make sure you know this is not stupid. This is a fact. And then goes on to say that if we have the right number of people, 2 or 3, and they are in agreement of what they want, it will be done by the Father. It doesn't say that what they want can't be personal or selfish. It doesn't say that you can't have sin in your life. It doesn't say that you can't be unrepented. It simply says what it says. So for Christians who love to play the context game and that wasn't Jesus speaking and this was misinterpreted, this is pretty clear. Do you believe this?
I see a dick in your future. I see a dick.
No more school shootings should happen. If you believe this, no more poverty, no more natural disaster deaths. So either you don't believe it or you're making excuses for it. And those excuses also come from other Bible verses because the Bible is a little bit unclear. We have verses telling us that only a man in righteous standing with God can have this. Maybe that's what you did wrong. You didn't pray long enough. Or in James, where it says not to pray for personal pleasures. So what if it's your kid you're praying for? Maybe that negates the prayer somehow. If only the Bible was consistent about what it meant about prayer, and if only the believer had the expectation that God would do what he says he's going to do, and hold God accountable for that. And I can just hear it now. There it is. Don't test God. God knows your intentions. You're just testing it. In fact, that's the main response to the study that was done on prayer. That's right, there was a study done by the Templeton Foundation, a few studies actually, on the effectiveness of prayer. And the results are not good. Which is why the Christians are saying, it's because God knew he was being tested. I would like to point out that God loves being tested. We have examples of God being tested all over the Bible, and God shows up. God God gives answers. In fact, one of those examples that is highly specific that is used in sermons by pastors about the power of prayer
I'll put your black ass to Stalin. I ain't talking Joseph Stalin either. I'm talking Stalin.
Elijah, if you want to read more about that. But God was tested, and God came through. That study was done really, really well. It was done with intercessory prayer, just in case those verses.
Yeah, cut your unhappy ass and fuck back to China and cut that goddamn coronavirus back with you, and infect the whole goddamn entire Chinese military and the goddamn Chinese government. Kill them all and let God sort the fuck out. That way China cannot be a threat to the United States of America. Kill them all and let God sort the fuck out.
Some people did not. Some people got better faster, some people got better slower. There was no visible effect on the group that did great. Now, that's probably very unconvincing to a believer because who cares about science and who cares about studies when you're dealing with faith and the power of the Almighty. But what I'd love to know is when you have two groups of people with at least 2 or more people, and they all agree on what they're asking for, and they're asking for their team to win the game, and then one team wins the game.
Man, this fucking pisses me off.
One group but not the other. God promises to
I'm gonna block this asshole.
Pray about silly things like that. Except the Bible doesn't say that. It doesn't say that at all. There are no conditions in that verse that I'm talking about. You've just added in claims from contradicting verses to help excuse the fact that God is not doing what he said.
Suck my slut.
Another big issue I have with prayer and with Christians is, again,
I hope you get a hemorrhoid for this shit, you son of a bitch.
And as Christians love to say, the answer can be
you
yes,
suck
no,
my
or
dick,
wait.
bitch.
But if you attribute any outcome post-prayer to God's glory, then you have set up the system.
You know what would be funny if I resigned, he won this when he was abandoned the game. Don't even think about it, slut.
Through something pretty tough with the husband.
Fuck
Marriage
his.
is a little bit rough.
Oh!
They're pregnant, and the text goes out to all the friends, and all the wives are talking, and every other sentence is thank God, and what an answer to prayer. Look how God is working in your guys' life to help patch things up, as if a baby is ever going to help a marital issue. That's what you do as a Christian.
You suck my dick, bitch. You suck my fucking dick, bitch. You suck my dick. Now fuck up and bring this phone down here. Now I'll take your bishop out for a poison dinner. I'll stick my dick up that bishop's butt and turn that bishop into a bitch shit.
The wife starts to bleed quite heavily. She's had a miscarriage before.
Suck my slut. Now fuck up and bring this phone down here, you slap-eyed slut. From China!
We're still so grateful. We're still so thankful to God. Maybe this is the actual thing that's
now
going to bring you and your husband through together. Not facing the joys of baby and creation, but dealing with the hardship that God places in front of you to your glory be to God. Everyone's fine with that answer. What about the first one, though? When everyone's thanking God for the answer to their marital issues via the baby. It's just gone. We can just make anything the answer to prayer. Now, thankfully, the baby was actually okay, and then we got a third round of prayers. Look at God, hearing our prayers that this would not be a miscarriage. God saved that baby, a baby that was never
suck my
slut that had nothing to do with the
now fuck up and move this bitch right here, slut.
And now he's getting back to the original.
You slut-eyed slut.
This is disgusting. And if you think that this is some freak thing that only happens in my friend groups because brain comes from the fundamental side of things, you're absolutely wrong. These are the most normal, everyday people we meet.
Suck
This
my
is just
dick,
simply
bitch.
what is in the religion. God can't fail under these conditions. Prayer always works under these conditions, and it's not honest. I say, put God to the test. I say, be like Jesus, who looks at the fig tree and sees there is no fruit and curses it to death. Religion has promised you that God answers your prayers. It has not delivered on that promise. It is not
suck my slut.
The truth that it claims. Curse it, be done with it, condemn it to death. This is the example God sets for us. But Brandon, what about all the times it really seemed like prayer did work? And instead of me giving a response here, I want to ask you, the Christian, what would you say to someone from another religion, or someone who's utilizing something like a medium or wishing well, that came to you with this very serious testimony? I asked for this, I begged for this, I prayed for that, and sure enough it came. Allah has heard my prayer. Krishna has heard my prayer. The medium knew what she was talking about. The horoscope read it correctly. That actually did happen today, right after I read it. You would attribute it to what? To chance? To coincidence? People always say it's too great for coincidence. That's the definition of a coincidence. People that go to the hospital do one of two things. They die there, or they leave there. If every time someone goes to the hospital and you pray for them, and then you thank God when they die for the life that they live and the good work He's doing by working out their death for good, because what Satan does for evil, God uses for good. Thank God that He's going to use this person even in their death. Or they get better, and you attribute that to God. Thank God for this miraculous healing that would have happened organically anyways.
You suck my dick, bitch. Suck my dick, suck my dick, suck my dick, suck my dick, suck my dick. You suck my dick, bitch. Suck my dick.
We read about the stories
You suck my
about
dick,
people who believe in their faith
bitch.
so strongly they don't believe in medical intervention, and so those people just die. And they're always shocked. They always turn around and thank God for His providence, His sovereignty. At least they're acting out of it. What's worse is the person who has the headache, prays for relief, and then takes the Tylenol alongside it, and then still thanks God when their headache goes away. What is this? How little is your faith? Maybe you have enough experience that there is no desired outcome ever coming.
You suck my
But it's nice to thank God after the fact, isn't it? This just doesn't work for me. I just do not understand this. Again, these are kind of silly examples, so some of them result in real people dying. But back to my original issue with people judging other people's prayer life. Someone is struggling with anxiety or depression, and instead of getting real cognitive behavioral therapy or getting on a medication that they might need, they are told that God did not make you to have a spirit of fear. You need to pray your way out of this. You need to believe in God enough. And they suffer and they suffer and they suffer. Sometimes it gets better, sometimes it does not. But how many times does prayer get in the way of action? That was one of the points I brought up earlier.
You suck
You have
my
money, you
dick,
could give it,
bitch.
you could help, but instead you pray. Like God's will be done.
Suck
Now you
my
feel better.
slut.
You did your
Suck
part, you
my
interceded.
dick.
And I'm talking about about myself here, and I wasn't a bad person. I helped when I could as a Christian, but I have to tell you that I felt my prayers were absolutely enough because I believed in my prayers. I believed in the power of God to answer my prayers. For other people. I hit all the different verses. I had the exact formula for getting your prayer right, so I formulated it into a way that hit all of them. And if I did that, then surely I could count on God to do what He said. So why should I give to that charity? Why should I go help that person myself? And I see the homeless person, instead of taking them for a meal or making sure they don't use the shelter system,
God damn it.
I drive by. It's an excuse. It is a cop out. I have to tell you that since my deconversion, I have been much more about action. I give more, I take more time, I'm more empathetic, I look for ways to actually help because I know that God's not doing it. There is no God looking out for them with perfect
God fucking damn it.
We are all we have. And yes, Christians give to charity. And yes, Christians do good deeds for other people. I'm not saying all Christians are bad or lazy or use prayer as an excuse or even believe that their prayer is an excuse or somehow. I believe they think they're doing the absolute right thing. And sometimes they do match with action, and that's great. But I know for a fact that many people rely on prayer as a suitable form.
That dumbass should have put my ass in check.
That's the last thing that I would say about prayer. And I've kind of done this in videos.
Right. You stupid! You could have taken that. You could have taken my whore out for poison
You
dinner.
have a God who knows everything and who is all powerful. He,
Kiss
for whatever
my
reason,
dick.
this video is not here to debate the problem of evil or
Dick.
suffering or anything like that.
Dick.
He, for whatever
Dick.
reason, let this earth run on its own, where people
Dick.
get sick, where people get hurt by accidents, where starvation and poverty are extremely common, where abuse and rape and murder and theft and every horrible thing happens on a daily basis in vast quantities, and then you get to pray about things. But according to the Bible, as Jesus taught us how to pray in the Lord's Prayer, we should be praying by will be done. Most of the time, when we get a prayer that is no, or that is wait, or that doesn't get answered, we are told it's because it wasn't in God's will. God has different plans. Well, then why did you pray? If you can't change God's will, and you can only pray within His will, then you are only praying to God to do the thing God already intends to do. Once again, proving that prayer is futile. What are you accomplishing? It is a sick game. Imagine me telling my son to plan for his birthday. Every little plan, every little particular, I'm going to list it out. Here's what time we're going to get up. Here's where I've scheduled a party. Here's what kind of cake you're going to get. Here's the presents that you're going to receive. Now, ask me for whatever you want for your birthday, and I'll do it for you. But what you ask for has to align with my plans, or I can't help you. What? How confusing. This is essentially what the Bible says, and what your preachers are telling you. But, okay, Dad, I want a dinosaur birthday cake. Good. That was what was in the plan.
Jesus
Prayer
fucking
granted.
Christ.
Now thank me. And tell everyone else what a good thing I did for you and how I answered your prayer. Okay, Dad, I want the Spider-Man Lego set. Not on the list. Denied. Now, thank me for my better plans for you, because my unlimited knowledge knows exactly what's best for you, and I've got a good plan for you. Thank me for that, and then tell everyone that I did answer your prayer. It just wasn't exactly in the way you thought it would be. But that is good. To my mind, biblical prayer is absolutely that ridiculous. That's silly.
God
If we
damn it.
change God's will, especially in things like intercessory prayer, that means we're also changing the will of another individual on this earth. That means free will is out the window. I know I use silly examples sometimes like praying for the football team to win, but let's just take that and run with it for a second. If you pray and that team wins, and they won because of your prayer, that means that they weren't going to win otherwise, which means that all the hard work of all of those players, and all of the practice, and all of the good coaching, and every other causal event that has led up to what the outcome of that game would have been was for nothing. You have interrupted their life, their version of free will to get an outcome that you can control via your ability to commune with God versus their ability to commune with God. Now, I know that's a silly example, and for that reason many of you won't take heed in it, but just extrapolate it to whatever you want. Maybe the winning side of a war. How many times have we heard that the U.S. has been so victorious in war because we're a Christian country versus non-Christian countries? I mean, this is the entire story of the Old Testament, that the army with the correct God won the battles. That's why having such a powerful God was so important. America is a Christian nation. We won our battles because of the prayers and belief of our people, the Christian people. Think about what that actually implies for the deaths of those men, women, and children from the losing countries. In what world did they have free will? So if prayer works, it immediately eradicates free will. And if it doesn't, then we have a lie from God. This to me is a real catch-22 for God. And quite simply, as a believer of over 30 years, I ran out of excuses for God. God. And this is what I'll end with. After 30 years of believing every literal chapter and verse, believing in His goodness, in His omniscience, in His sovereignty, in His plan, wanting to fulfill my destiny in God's will for His kingdom, not for my benefit, not for my gain, seeking out after Him, having daily prayer time, going to church, being a leader, studying the Bible, calling my faith my greatest asset, sharing the gospel, praying for others, giving my tithes, giving my offerings, and relying on God not just as some supernatural supreme being, but as my personal Savior and the author of my life. And for about 3 years at the end of that, I begged God to reveal Himself fully, to help me continue to believe, to answer prayers, to give me what so many people around me were getting all of the time, the reassurance, the miracles, the visions, the answers to prayer, the showing up, and I just didn't get it. What is the Christian answer for that? Besides pulling apart my motives in my heart and my sincerity, which you cannot know and do not have a right to claim against. Let's just assume that it was as sincere as the other person next to me who received the answers, who God showed up for, who God increased their faith for, who God helped them to believe, to remain in the faith. Why them and not me? What can possibly be the explanation for that other than that there is no God? I don't know.
Now buck up and overlook this right here. I can hear
I
your
do not
breath.
want this for my life. I did not want to go through these trials, these questions for how to raise my children, this dissension with my family, this disconnection with my friends. This is not ideal, but it is real, and prayer fails. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching today. As always, I'll have resources down below to help you with your own issues or struggles. Feel free to reach out to me at my email or on my Instagram, both of which are listed below. If there's anything I can do for you on this journey, as I know how hard it can be. If you have questions, you want to bring up topics, I'd love to hear them in the comments. If you think I'm totally wrong and you want to have a video about it and really get into some of these details in greater length, let's just do it. So thanks for being here. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you on the next one.
You suck my dick, bitch. You suck my dick, bitch. God damn it.
What if the biggest miracle in your life was losing God? You pray, plead, you believe that every hardship, financial strain, relationship drama, or personal failure is a supernatural ambush demanding a heavenly rescue. And you wait, sometimes forever, for an answer. What if that waiting room is exactly what's holding you back? By the end of this video, you're going to get detailed insight into why saying goodbye God didn't break me, it saved my life. Let's jump into insight number 1. I found relief and responsibility in the absence of the supernatural. I grew up on scriptures like Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, that says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers." I used to treat every crisis, financial squeeze, relationship fallout, personal mistake, as a supernatural ambush requiring divine rescue. I was stuck in Durkheim's Anatomy, lost without the old cosmic norms. But the moment I ripped up that script and built my own moral code, everything changed. Festinger's cognitive dissonance described exactly what I felt. Torn between obeying an unseen authority and
Kiss one of those fucking bones, your blood.
let go of the belief and the tug of war ends. And I stood on the shoulders of enlightenment giants, Voltaire, Diderot, who rejected metaphysical battles in favor of human autonomy. That's why saying goodbye God didn't break me. It saved me, too. Once the existence of a God faded away, the world as is made complete sense, and my responsibility as a human became increasingly clear. I grew up on scriptures like Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9, that says, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." Psalms chapter 24, verse 1 says, "The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and all who dwell therein." I used to read these verses as cosmic footnotes, God owning every inch of creation and charting my every move. My plans felt meaningless. I was a guest in my own life, waiting for divine directions that never arrived. Drawing on Peter Berger's idea of plausibility structures, I learned how communities reinforce divine authorship over reality until you lose your sight of your own agency. Breaking free means reconstructing meaning from your own lived experience. Your life becomes your canvas. Rodder's locus of control research shows that shifting from an external God decides to an internal I decide standpoint boosts motivation, well-being, and goal setting. The moment I claimed my own power, my goals became mine to reach. Historically, Renaissance civic humanists in Italy cast off God's inscrutable dominion in favor of human-centered reason. Artists and scientists dared to paint and probe the world on their own terms.
Damn, I could have stuck my dick in his butt.
Now let's dive into insight number 3. I embraced, celebrated, and appreciated my human capacity to learn, fail, understand, and adapt. I used to read scriptures like Romans chapter 7, verse 18, that says, "For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. I used to view every mistake as a cage locking me in, convinced that without divine intervention, my nature was powerless. Failure felt like a final verdict, not a learning
goddamn
drawing on
goddamn
mindset communities, those online forums where risk-taking
I could have stuck my dick in that data. I'm stupid!
Failure as feedback unleashes progress. Carol Dweck's research on growth versus fixed mindset shows that when you believe your abilities can evolve through effort, every misstep becomes a springboard for improvement. And long before Dweck, during the scientific revolution, Newton and Curie embraced iterative failure, testing, tweaking, and failing fast until breakthrough discoveries emerged. Their legacy became my blueprint. Fail fast, learn faster. Now let's move into Insight 4. I rejected the idea that life was beyond my understanding and therefore the dependency on others for decisions. Isaiah chapter 55 verse 8 through 9 reads, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so are my ways above your ways." I used to take that verse as a verdict on my own intellect, believing my reasoning was worthless compared to divine wisdom. Every choice felt safer if handed off to experts or clergy, turning me into a decision-deferred bystander. Drawing on Putnam's social capital theory, I saw how empowering individual agency decentralizes decision-making and builds resilient networks. Communities thrive when everyone owns their choices. Bandura's self-efficacy research shows that mastering small decisions reinforces belief in tackling bigger challenges. I started practicing choice in the little things, and each win fueled confidence for the next. Historically, Enlightenment salons in Europe were ordinary citizens debating politics and science on equal footing, refusing to defer to aristocrats or priests. I borrowed from their spirit. My mind was not only valid, it was...
There are so many things that I want to talk about today, but this is going to be my first video diary. And what I will say is that I am not here to influence you. I am not here to sell you anything.
Oh, this damn girl again. Come on, slut. Show the damn screen, slut. What the hell? Stupid! God, that was stupid! Stupid! Stupid. The stupid machine! If he has any damn sense, he'll move that 4 right here. Stupid! Cause that was stupid! Almost as stupid as me, overlooking where I could have taken this workout for a poison in with my food. My abs and my dismounted. goddamn motherfucker. Come on, you slut. God damn it. Jesus goddamn fucking Christ. Jesus goddamn fucking Christ. Jesus fucking Christ. Jesus fucking Christ. Jesus fucking. God fucking.
We are Myth Vision. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being patient with your host, Eric Lambert. I'm bringing you Dr. Robert McNair Price today, and we're going to be talking about some controversial contradictions. You know, many Christians come up and they have great explanations. And, I can't help but say it. It's like they want to harmonize no matter what. Yeah, there were 3 women at the tomb, but this one says 2 because he thought it was important to only mention 2 of them and not 3 of them. And, there's always these not that important contradictions, so to speak, that Christians say is not really a contradiction. Well, Dr. Bob's going to bring to you guys some contradictions today. And I hope if you pay close attention, which I usually have to re-watch these videos just to learn from the very footage that I myself am posting, Dr. Bob's going to bring up some stuff, so make sure you replay and watch it multiple times to catch some of the details that this exquisite scholar, Dr. Robert McNair Price, brings to the table. I love this guy. Make sure you guys go down in the description of the video, look at his YouTube channel, because I'm going to tell you right now, there's a couple out there, but the one that him and his wife are primarily going for now, and they're uploading ancient material, hidden podcasts, stuff you guys have probably never even heard of prior to his Bible Geek days. You guys are going to catch on his YouTube channel. And go down to Amazon, type in his name, order his books. It really helps him out. Him and his wife are at home now, and this is what they do for a living. I love you guys. Let's get right into it.
Bob, the contradiction himself. How are you, brother?
I like that, being an incarnate contradiction, yeah. I'm doing great, how about you?
I'm trying to stay warm. It's 20, 30 degrees here in Washington State, and I said, you know what would warm me up? I think the pits of hell as we start to talk about the contradictions of the Bible. So who better than to bring you on?
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's why my theme song, my intro song on the Bible Geek is Highway to Hell. For a while we didn't use it because some people said, well, it might be off-putting with some particular theoretical listeners that might be out there and be affronted by hearing this. And so for a while I acquiesced and used something else, and then I decided, hell with it, I'm going back to Highway to Hell. But the contradiction thing is always a fascinating and vexing question, because there are people who are hell-bent on trying to say, oh no, there aren't any contradictions. Well, why is that? Because there can't be. And why is that? Well, it has to do with not faults in the Bible, but rather faults in some people's doctrine of the Bible. And it seems to me that once you parade all of these contradictions, which I'm about to do, a select list, that ought to tell you that you're, well, like one of my favorite theologians, Bugs Bunny, said, I mean, wrong point in Albuquerque. Something's got to be wrong. I mean, if I could see maybe there's like one or two of these things. You could say, oh, they're just puzzles. Like, for instance, in Deuteronomy, it's going over the various kinds of creatures who are kosher for eating, and it says something about four-legged grasshoppers or insects or something, and everybody who's not a fundamentalist always chuckles at that, just like, how stupid were these people, and anybody can see that. It's like, and I thought, I'm not sure if this is a contradiction, that this would be too stupid. I wonder if we're misunderstanding it, like Warfield said. Sure, you got it right. And then somebody told me that, in fact, it's a question of whether you consider the huge back-bowed legs as legs or not, and that some taxonomists in the ancient world apparently didn't think of them that way. Like when you say, and I'll get way off on this, but when you say crabs are arthropods like insects are, and one of the marks of this is that they have 6 legs, and you look at a crab and it's obviously got 8 appendages. What's going on? They don't consider the 2 front ones with the huge pinchers as legs. Well, it turns out that must be what the author had in mind. You couldn't be that stupid to think that they're not even going to notice. Come on. So, yeah, maybe that's the case. Maybe you could explain 1 or 2 of them plausibly. But the problem is you have what I like to call a zoo full of monsters here. And it reflects not on the Bible. When you have a contradiction or an error, like the mustard seed not being the smallest of all seeds. If the problem isn't with the Bible exactly, it's not like the Bible writer was just an idiot. You're almost insulting the writer to set it up that way. Often contradictions tell us a whole lot that we wouldn't have known about the Bible otherwise. Like if they're two, as we'll see in a moment, there are contradicting accounts of how something happened or different versions of somebody's story. You can't squeeze them both together. That's not bad. That's good. It's telling, great example of this. There are 2 versions of the story of Abraham and Hagar, and one of them implies that Ishmael, her son, was a baby when she went off into the wilderness with him, but another one implies that he must have been like 12 years old. And you think, what the heck? How can you get both these in? Or when there are 3 versions of this, when Abraham goes into Egypt and his wife is so beautiful he's afraid the king is going to want her for his harem and kill Abe, get him out of the way. And so he has to lie and say, well, actually, she's my sister or something. But if you look back at the earlier stories about Abraham and Sarah, she's nearly 100 years old. What is the deal that the king is going to look at this old shell, this old hag, and say, hubba, hubba? Jeffrey Epstein in reverse. What the heck? Can the author have intended that? No. He obviously just patched various narrative scraps he knew from tradition or whatever, and he didn't want to leave anything out. And so, yeah, the king is going to look at this old shell, this old hag, and say, hubba, hubba. Jeffrey Epstein in reverse. What the heck? Can the author have intended that? No. He obviously just patched various narrative scraps he knew from tradition or whatever, and he didn't want to leave anything out. And so whether he could, and sometimes you can see him trying to harmonize things, but sometimes it just didn't occur to him, and the results are ridiculous. But it's not because the writer is stupid, it's because there's a limit to what you could do editorially. And once you realize that, you say, okay, I see what's going on here. What the Bible actually becomes more interesting because of it. And you're saving the Bible. You're delivering it from looking stupid.
I agree.
Not the like about the Bible, but let's not just caricature it. And they don't mean to, but their theology forces them to.
If you don't mind me mentioning on that, Bob, because I definitely 100% agree with you. I've told people today, look, everyone can believe what you want. Freedom of religion. I am a big fan of this. Okay. However, when you start talking about it, you write this in your most recent book, the superstition. Okay, the superstition Christians, what they've done with the system surrounding the text, okay, is what I think makes the text look so ridiculous. Now, where I came in, and I don't want to we've got so much to cover, we're going to cover it, but I don't know if you can see where I'm coming from. When I started transitioning out of Christianity and deconstructing, I wanted to somewhat protect the text. Now, what I mean by that is Paul claimed that a resurrection happened. In my mind, it either happened literally, as Christians want to say, or it didn't literally happen. And so in my head, I said, it's not either this or that. What if it literally happened esoterically? What if it was some type of not actual physical body out of the grave, so to speak, literally?
Don't even think about it.
It was an allegory, the same way that supposedly Jonah literally got spit up out of the belly of a well, literally.
He's trying to get at easy argument.
So that is what I try to do to justify and protect. What if this text has been abused by those who hold it so sincere and misrepresent maybe what the actual teaching context of it was? So that's something that was crossing my mind, and I don't know where some of this lies, but after listening to you and other for a while, I'm stuck in this position where I go, somebody's gotta be lying. You start getting later in these letters, it's like somebody's trying to do something, and I wanted to try to be allegorical. I wanted to try to give it the benefit of the doubt in every aspect I can. Is there that stuff going on? I'm sure. But is Paul's resurrection supposedly a real, literal, supposed claim, or is this some allegory in the heavens? What's going on? And so I don't want to offshoot, because I know you probably did a show on this right here, but that's what I wanted to do when I heard contradiction, was I wanted to somewhat protect the text. And today I don't think we're necessarily doing that, but you are saying this is better than trying to look silly and suggest this literally happened and this is what's going on. Anyway, I'm sorry, I had to wrap it down, give you where I was at, and maybe you can touch on it.
Yeah, there are plenty of narrative contradictions that seem to denote a combination of different sources, because the compiler just didn't care or figured it's more important to squeeze in all the bits and pieces. But there are also instances where you really do have to wonder if the author meant something literally, like at the end of the Gospel of Matthew, the Great Commission, where Jesus says, go out and disciple all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the world.
I see a dick in your future. I see a dick.
No ascension follows that. Who is he talking to? Surely it's to the readers. This isn't really even supposed to be a historical report. Or the great story of the Emmaus disciples. When Jesus is there talking to them, they don't recognize him. He vanishes as he's consecrating the bread they're going to eat. How can you not think this is symbolic of the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper? It seems to me clearly a symbolic story. And that's to insist, no, it really happened. that, I think, truncates the meaning of the story, or the multiplication of loaves and fish. Those stories seem to be Eucharistic stories, too. And literally, Jesus is increasing the amount of food by hard-to-imagine means. Like, it's not just that, oh, maybe there was some physics involved, I don't know, but like David Friedrich Strauss said, what is it we're supposed to envision Jesus doing? Is he taking one of the fish or one of the rolls and,
oh my God,
it like it's a sponge and tearing it apart and then doing the same thing with each other? It just doesn't make any sense, because you're not really supposed to think of it that way. The point is mere bread. It's not mere bread, because there is spiritual nourishment in this far beyond the literal significance of the bread and the Eucharist. If you don't see that, it's just a freak show. It's just like, oh, here's an account of the abominable snowman or UFO abduction. What? How would that be interesting? But would it have any spiritual value? And it so seems to me that some of these things are not intended to be taken literally. John Dominic Crossan thinks none of it is. He thinks that it was all symbolic and allegorical, and that they figured that Christians would understand that, and they're stupid when they don't. I'm not convinced of that, but sometimes I think that is going on. Or like when Jesus says in John 20, do you believe because you've seen, he says to Thomas, and then you can just see him turning toward the audience and saying, blessed is he who believes without seeing. Obviously, he's breaking the fourth wall and talking to the reader. And how can you ignore this stuff? You're taking it literally when you understand the kind of text you're dealing with, and sometimes it is symbolic. Other times probably not, but that's very difficult. And of course, people don't like this to admit that there's this range of genres, types of writing in the Bible, because they don't want to miss out on certain literal miracles. They want to think of miracles as proofs for their belief, as if that has anything to do with faith. That's very strange to me, that you're talking about salvation through faith. What sort of faith is this? If you don't, I gotta have evidence that demands a verdict. It seems very self-contradictory, if we get contradictions. But here's another problem with contradictions. Broadly, evangelicals, conservatives like to say biblical authority means that the literal, as far as we can tell, the intended meaning of the author is binding on the believer. What it says you should do, well, do it. What it says is true, you should believe it. And so another way of saying it is the apparent sense of the text is authoritative. Now, why put it that way? Well, that's because Martin Luther was wisely trying to limit the scope of biblical interpretation. He's living in a time where medieval Catholicism can just get anything they want out of the text, as if it were a Rorschach want. Oh, yeah, it's not on the surface, but this is the deeper meaning. Now, that in itself was an ancient attempt to get the Bible out of a tight spot. Like when Origen says about the Garden of Eden, he says, no adult believes that a snake spoke to a guy. And he says, even in the Gospels, there are hundreds of historical absurdities. Well, what should you conclude as is fun? No, you should realize that the author must be putting the red light on. Get it? You gotta look deeper. There's something else going on here. Like I just tried to give a couple of examples of. But once you say that that's possible, if you're in, as I think Walter Bauer put it, a marshy bog, You don't know what's solid ground under your feet. And it can start meaning anything. Well, Martin Luther says, well, we got indulgences and this and that. Oh, well, it's not on the surface, but that's the deeper meaning. Just making it into a ventriloquist dummy. So Martin Luther tried to say, no, it's the plain sense of the text, not the weird esoteric meanings.
And do you think that harmed? Do you think that in a way that he's trying to do something he thinks is right, of course, but doesn't that also possibly put some? And I think this is important for our audience who's watching. Could you jump right into these contradictions? Of course. Could you go into them? But I like what you're doing because there's a prerequisite to getting into these contradictions. I think are important and laying the ground right here, like genre, all this stuff. And Martin Luther's trying to say plain reading of the text, but what if the plain reading of the text, as Protestants have done so well, I'm saying it literally, they've got literal helicopters being locusts that are flying in Revelation. So the plain reading of the text tells me what looks like a locust, a modern day helicopter. So there's damage that can be done by the plain literal reading of some of these things. I think are you suggesting that maybe there is that, yes, the medieval Catholic Church is abusing things to their own, of course, gain and many other things, but isn't there this plain reading of the text can be harmful as well from really getting to the possible meaning?
Well, it can, but that's a really interesting case because what even the fundamentalist is doing there is to say, this is not a genre to be taken literally. Anybody can see that it's filled with cipher language. And if they know enough about it, they can say there are other ancient apocalypses like 4th Ezra and so on, or parts of Daniel and Zechariah that are obviously supposed to be symbolic about upcoming historical events. So they're willing to say, just like the Psalms are not literally true because they couldn't be. They're not making claims about history or anything. They're not telling stories, really. Same thing with Revelation. Surely this means something esoteric that the author figured you could get, right? This calls for wisdom. Let him who has wisdom count the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man. In other words, you can figure it out. And however they did that. So they figure, well, yes, I'm trying to discern the author's intent, and it's not a genre that's to be taken literally. But the Gospels, they're straightforward narrative, presumably they are.
This really fucking pisses me off.
I don't think they've looked into it deep enough as critical scholars have. They start saying, well, there are earmarks of this, something else is going on here, like I just gave examples of. But the really fatal thing about the plain sense of the text is, how apologists will say, well, you call this a contradiction, but it's only an apparent contradiction. That is,
it's a goddamn contradiction, bitch.
But if we really try hard, we can figure out how somewhere both are true. Or, even if we can't, one day we'll get to heaven and they'll have a huge seminar taught by angels saying, well, I know you've been waiting to hear how the heavenly voice at the baptism said both. This is my son, and you are my son. Well, here it is. And he goes, son of a gun, why didn't I think of it? And so they're saying, it's, as far as we know, it's an apparent contradiction. Well, wouldn't that be the worst kind if biblical authority is a matter of the apparent sense, the plain sense of the text being normative? If it's on that level that the contradiction exists, we're screwed. Right? What are you going to do about divorce, for instance, if it seems like Matthew allows it but Mark doesn't? Well, you're up the creek there. And so apparent contradictions have to be the worst kind, according to the way they view biblical authority. And they never seem to realize this. Or sometimes they'll just say, well, in a case like that, we do have to retreat to what I would call far-fetched, but they say figurative or allegorical readings. Martin Luther understood that if you did that, you're opening Pandora's box, because then you can start thinking that it means something esoteric even when it doesn't contradict. So then you're going to be believing in the assumption of Mary and papal authority and all that. So there's another reason that
God damn it.
attempts to iron out the contradictions. Contradictions to the Word of God. No, you're barking up the wrong tree. You got to go back to the drawing board. And I admit that is also a Pandora's box, as witness all the attempts of well-meaning, more liberal scholars to find some locus of biblical authority. I did a whole book on that. It was my theological dissertation. It was published by Prometheus under the title Inerrant to the Wind, where I try to show how there are about 5 different attempts of modern evangelicals to admit, okay, the Bible is not inerrant. There are factual mistakes and contradictions, but if you define biblical authority this way, okay, that ought to work. Well, there are 5 ways. I try to show how they're all borrowed from other kinds of theology, and they all have implications that evangelicals have always tried to avoid. And this goes to show that Hamilton's quite right when they said, if you start questioning the inerrancy of the Bible, you're going to wind up in some sort of liberal or Catholic Christianity. I tried to show, he was right. It is.
I'm fixing to get myself another whore.
Be as honest with the Bible as you can. I have a book I'm going to be working on pretty soon, I hope, called When Gospels Collide. And I have this series of books with these sci-fi titles like Night of the Living Savior and The Amazing Colossal Apostle. I've been thinking of this one for a long time, and what I want to do is, just with the Gospels, take a bunch of contradictions and say, why do these differ? What is the point? They differ because one writer has changed the previous one, but what's he getting at? And often you can tell. Some of them still stump me, but I look forward to trying to make sense of that. Why do the Gospels contradict as to who Peter is speaking to in the courtyard when he denies knowing Jesus? Is he speaking to a soldier, a servant girl, another servant girl, and so on? None of the Gospels have the same
and
three.
You delivered,
why would anybody change that? I still haven't figured that out, but that's the kind of thing I'm going to deal with, and most of them I think I can. And I'm trying to say these aren't just goofs. Like, you can show how the resurrection, the empty tomb narratives, don't just contradict as if some idiot couldn't get his story straight. It's very clear to me how one changes the other and why. That's pretty easy to see, but you're not gonna see it as long as you got the blinders.
He's probably sitting in his chair cursing up a storm,
make it look ridiculous. And so I'm hoping to do that book. By the way, I've also got a book that's pretty close to being finished, where I've written a bit of it, but John Loftus and I are editing it, called Varieties of Jesus Mythicism, where we're going to have chapters on the sacred mushroom theory, the astrotheology approach, the mystery religion approach, Gnosticism, the sacrifice in heaven instead of on earth, and a bunch of things. It's very, very impressive by impressive writers. So that's still some months away, I'm sure, but that might interest our audience, I think. Mm-hmm. But if we want to actually get into some of the contradictions,
time to get into the meal. I'm going to mute, and this is going to have, I'm going to actually change the screen up where you're shown. And I actually just thought it was important to kind of bring up a small little prerequisite so people can go, man, you can go anywhere with this. You can kind of, there's a couple different ways, and anyways, I look forward to what you have to say about
Don't even think about it!
Now, let me ask you, I need to bring up on the screen the list.
I'm fixing to get myself another whore.
Which means I won't be able to see this screen, but I hope you can still see me. Let's see.
You're good. Yep, you're good.
Okay. Well, going back to Genesis, here's the first one, about the order of creation. Genesis chapter 1 has God create plants. This is in verses 11 through 12. And then
don't even think about it,
animal
slut.
species, and that's in verses 20 through 25. And then finally, at the end of the process, he creates men and women, verses 26 through 27. Apparently, several of each, just like the animals, the birds, the mammals, beasts of the field, and all that stuff, groups. Okay, and not one specimen of each. Okay, so and the last one is humanity. But in Genesis chapter 2, we have a completely different order of creation. First, in 2:7, God makes a male human, the Adam, which just means human being, without specifying it further, like anthropos in Greek, or mankind, or whatever. Okay. Then he plants the Garden of Eden, and that's verses 8 through 9. And he's going to have the Adam be the caretaker for that. And apparently it's God's garden where he and the other gods implied earlier in the story get their sustenance. That's verses 8 through 9. And only then the animals in verses 18 through 20. Now, why does he even make the critters? Well, to keep the man or the human being company, because apparently it wasn't very time consuming to tend the garden, get rid of the weeds and so on, and he figures the man needs company, so he tries to create some other life form that would keep him company. And that's why he makes the animals and brings them one by one to the man, and he gives them names and so forth. I think I'll call you an orangutan, and so on. And then it doesn't work. God's experiment has failed, but we did get all the animals out of it. Apparently, it's because they can't speak, like in a Tarzan movie, right? Tarzan somehow communicates, but they can't speak, but they're his company. And he decides, well, because everything he makes from the ground, as he did the Adam, is too different. And so finally he says, maybe I'll have better luck, as we might say, cloning him, and takes a piece of him and makes another human. This one, of course, is just called the woman until the very end of chapter 3. And then that's where all the trouble starts and so on. But you can't get these two together. It's a violent contradiction. Did he make plants and then animals, then human beings? Or did he make a male human, or an androgynous one possibly, then the plants, then the animals, as kind of an afterthought?
Holy stupid! Because that was stupid!
So you could say, well, I guess stupid
machine!
And he couldn't remember what he had written. No, a number of factors, stylistic, etc., make it clear. Chapter 1 has what we call the priestly creation account, the 6-day creation, but chapters 2 and 3 have the J or Yahweh's account, which has the Garden of Eden, and one man and one woman, unlike the priestly, which has a bunch of them, right? And there are various other differences there, but that's very
okay, last game. Win, lose, draw, glitch, battle, report, one fusion, rematch. Let's go out of the shite. Go there.
Makes to me. I've said it many times. There's nothing more pious than understanding the text. And so I think once we do, once we admit there are contradictions, it helps us to understand what the Bible's getting at. But most people, of course, don't want to. I mean, they think they do, but the thing is, they're they're just reading it for edification.
I'm getting in your business. I'm getting in your business. I'm getting in your damn business.
It all has to agree. And it just doesn't. So if they want to understand the Bible, you got to go back to the drawing board. I could go on to Cain and his wife, but would you like to discuss that at all?
If you think that you have something unique and different that you think you can bring to the table for the audience, because I think most people who've looked into contradictions have said, where did he get his wife? You know, like he's the first
I meant the Eden versus the 7-day creation. Yeah, I do want to talk.
Okay, yeah, sure. Feel free to go into whatever you want to go into. I'm here for the ride. I'm taking notes.
Okay. Well, shortly, after they learn the secret of procreation, and they're named, by the way. It's not clear, by the way, the rabbis pointed out that the shift between Adam, human being, and what the man and the woman are called once she emerges from the side, they're called the Ish, the male, or the man, and Isha, the woman. Almost like in English, man, woman, Isha. And then from there on in, that becomes a proper name for the man. He is Adam, and then he names the woman Eve. And that's the name of a mythological mother goddess in several of these Mediterranean religions. And then they mate and they have a son. Verse 1 is Cain in Genesis 4:17. Where did Cain get his wife? There's a classic stumper. Who is she supposed to be, since we've only been told about Cain, and it's a big deal that he's the first human actually born as we are? Well, let's see. Did they have a daughter, and that's not mentioned, and so that his wife is his sister? Then you got questions like, did God suspend the incest taboo, as well as any bad genetic effects? There's a big problem there. I mean, especially if you want to take it literally, sacred incest. Well, why bother with this when you can more naturally explain it in terms of the narrative being a patchwork? Because there are clues in the rest of these little Cain episodes that are all strung together that they were originally set in different historical periods, because there was like a Cain cycle where these envision different places and times. For instance, in these, he is not the first human infant to be born into an empty world, because he builds a city in 4:17. Who's going to live there? I mean, he doesn't say he builds a house, he builds a city. It can't be like one of 3 people alive on the planet. Similarly, who is it he thinks is going to kill him in 4:14? And this is where God gives them the mark, so that anybody who sees him will say, oh, we better not screw with this guy. You know who that is? Look at the mark. That's Cain. He's a terrible killer. Who's he afraid of? Is he afraid his parents are going to come after him and kill him? It clearly means that there's loads of people around. And what's the mark? Well, it has to be a tribal or clan tattoo that a particular rival non-Israelite clan has, that identifies them as fierce warriors and tells everybody else to back off, steer clear of them. So this, and he is imagined as the, well, we would say mythical ancestor of the Canaanites. The name Cain is related to that. And so it's just like, this is almost as old as the Cain story now, but if you've ever seen Xena, Warrior Princess, a big show in the 90s, Xena was sort of a female Hercules, and she's going all over the Middle East and Europe. In antiquity, it never says exactly when, but if you compare all the episodes, in one of them, she meets Hercules several times. Then she meets Galen, the 2nd century AD physician, and she meets Mary and Joseph headed for Bethlehem. She is involved in the Trojan War, and there's several. She meets King David and Julius Caesar. How long did this woman live? Was she like a wandering Jew? She lived on age after age? No, it doesn't intend that. The point is that, she lived way back then. Let's imagine the adventures she could have had in general antiquity. Well, that's the way, and that was the way it was with Hercules. Herodotus tried to figure out when Hercules must have lived, and he gave up because Hercules is mentioned in different stories that imply different historical settings. Well, in the same way with Cain, there are various Cain stories that imagined him living in different periods. So was the writer just an idiot who couldn't keep the story straight? No, he's a compiler who's trying to save every little bit of sacred narrative he could gather. So you're vindicating the Bible when you understand it this way. I mean, and on the other hand, what the heck? What kind of spiritual value is there in just taking it all literally? I mean, that's quite a burden. Oh yeah, I gotta believe everything in biblical narrative really happened, or I'm going to hell. What's the point of that? I mean, and not that anybody in the New Testament ever says things like this. Does Paul say, if you confess with your mouth that Cain murdered his brother Abel and believe in your heart that happened, you will be saved? No. Does he say, if you will believe that Jesus walked on water, you'll be saved? No. Nobody ever says anything like that in the Bible. But they all wrap it up in one big bag. You gotta believe this or you're out of here. No Christian would doubt that. The pressure's off if you look at it this way. And again, I'm not trying to just make it easy for people. I'm trying to make the Bible understandable, something that's good in its own right, rather than making it a hostage to a theological scheme that only caricatures it. Well, it's amazing how some of these are never noticed, seemingly. Like, here's another goodie in the same chapter, Genesis 4, verse 2. It says that Abel is the first shepherd of humanity, presumably, and that Cain is the first farmer. And, that's the occasion for the trouble with their offerings, that Abel is wise enough to give God meat, whereas Cain gives him a veggie burger, right? The fruit of the ground. Obviously, God has superior taste. He's a meat eater. But then in verse 20, we go into this one of the big genealogies of the pre-flood people. Verse 20 says that a different guy was the first herdsman. Jabal or Jabal, depending on how you prefer saying it. He is said to be the first nomadic herdsman, and then his brother Jubal, from which we get jubilation and jubilee, he's the first musician. And that both fit shepherding nomad culture. But in Genesis 9:20, Noah is the first tiller of the soil. How can that be if Cain was? Oh boy. So what's the deal there? Well, simply that there were different stories that had just been stitched together kind of arbitrarily, and they didn't want to leave one of them out. And so, but good luck. I mean, you could say that, well, Noah started, maybe he rediscovered agriculture after the flood. No, it doesn't say that. It says that back when it says that Cain was the first farmer and so on. We're seeing him depicted as a culture hero, the founder of this lifestyle.
Stupid! Cuz that was
about it being
stupid!
interrupted by a world-destroying flood. Say that Noah was the first tiller of the soil after the flood. No, it's just, again, a patchwork of fascinating patches. Speaking of the flood, though, how long did the flood last? Was it a total of 150 days? Well, that's what Genesis 7:24 says. Or did it last only 61 days, that is, with 40 days of continuous rain, and then 3 weeks of drainage with the sky clear? Now that's what it says in Genesis 8:6 through 12. Which was it? I mean, I don't know that anybody has had the chutzpah to say, well, it did last 150 days, but the writer was only interested in 61 of them. You know, are you joking? Does anybody even say it? I don't know. Or maybe they just kind of hope you won't notice. The moderns, I don't mean the biblical writers. And similarly, in this story, how many animals did Noah bring on board? Did he bring a single pair of every animal species? Well, that's what it says in 6:19 verses 20. Or did he bring 7 pairs of kosher animals? That is, he could slaughter and eat some of them while the ship was afloat. With only 1 pair of non-kosher ones. Just
his
Holy and Petunia Pig, no other ones, because he's safe, they're not going to eat him. That's in 7:2 through 3. Well, the solution